Welcome back. Thank you for hanging out with us once again. This is the one and only IT in the D Show. I'm your host, Bob Waltenspiel, hanging out, co-host, producer extraordinaire, Randy Walker. Guest this week, I don't know how the hell we pulled this off, but we did. We got Lou Maresca in the house. TWiET.tv this week in enterprise tech in the house live. We're going to be talking all things about his 10-year run on his podcast and video podcast and all the things that go along with life there. And they get in the weeds. They're nerds, man. This is going to be a fun conversation. You could find us online, itinthed.com, and do us a favor, give us a like on the socials, subscribe to us everywhere podcasts are sold. Don't forget, by the time this podcast releases, it's going to be the 18th, Randy, or the 19th? 19th. I never write this stuff down. We're going to be at the Eastern Palace Club for our third Thursday meetup.com/IT in the D. 5 to 8, no speakers, no sponsors, just a bunch of IT nerds with tiki drinks in their hands, talking shop. Lou, how they treat you, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Bob.
No, it's honestly, I rarely say it's an honor. It's been a few times, but no, it's like you're one of the godfathers, man. It's fantastic to have you on the show. We sincerely appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. You know, it's funny that you said that, obviously, because our show was started by a Jesuit priest. So I always feel like he handed it off to me after he decided to have a higher calling and go to Rome and to the Vatican. And then I feel like there's something in there somewhere, some higher calling.
Did he bless you? Did he splash water on you?
That's right.
You still hear from Padre?
Yeah.
I listened to some other shows on the network that he was on, but
he still comes on actually on some of the TWiET shows once in a while. You know, when they allow him to kind of get out and venture out, but we try to get him back on in TWiET. He's always busy. He's always like, oh, I'm dealing with streaming stuff for the Pope and stuff like that.
Probably a little more important.
So congrats on episode 500. It was funny, unbeknownst, Randy and I both listened to your latest episode. And Randy's like, yeah, a lot of that went over my head. I go, yeah, it sounds like work to me. Like it felt like I was at work. But man, you guys get in the absolute weeds. Like how...
we do.
Like with us, we've been doing this as long as you guys have, for about 10 years. And we used to read stuff all week, and then we'd create like just a Gmail thread with and we wouldn't talk about it during the week because we're all friends. And then we get on the show and we're like, oh my God, did you hear about this? Or did you know about that? And what about this new thing that came out? And then we'd kind of have these natural,
right.
You know, how do you guys, like, are you guys go through the same transgressions to pick topics? Like what's the process like?
Yeah. I think we started out following the same format that we did when we first started, where we start out with just the news blips, which is like we find out different stories that happen during the week and we put it in our own voice and we just kind of talk about it. And then the bites ended up being topics that one of us saw that kind of hit home for us. And then we went and talked about it a little bit more and then brought the others in and got their thoughts on it. And I would say those topics usually are, the topics that really get us heated about stuff, the ones that, maybe they're talking about Adobe fixing, AI generated images. Well, yeah, that's bullshit. Right. So like, that's not going to happen anytime soon. And so like, we want to talk about that. So I think that's usually how, and it usually comes together pretty late in the day and in the week because things come out, issues happen, like the DDoS attack on Google recently. We wanted to really dig into that and how they solved it. So stuff like that. I would say, Curtis Franklin is a security analyst for AMD, and he's in the weeds every day with lots of corporations, just like you guys are dealing with companies and real solutions. And he always has stuff he needs to talk about that he hasn't been able to write about or analyze. And so he brings a lot of the topics to the table too. And then Brian Chi, who's, working, he's just a solutions guy. He's been a solutions guy for his entire life. He worked in, he builds these networks and these solutions for lots of different organizations. And so he's always bringing cool stuff to the table. I'm usually the boring one.
That's usually, I just ask the questions and let the smart people talk. Yeah. So yeah,
that's right. Exactly right.
But you guys had, I was excited to see you had a friend of our show and a friend of the Detroit scene, Jeff Marasini, on lately. How did you get? He's the CISO of Altair. If you haven't met him, and he's like one of the PenguinCon, always a volunteer. How did you guys end up getting hooked with Jeff?
It's funny because we do a lot of shows and a lot of people are we have like a live chat room. We have like an old school IRC chat room. And then we have the members only Discord channels as well. And he's in both of them. Okay. And the other day, we did a show on out of band networking. We showed some tools and some fun stuff. And Brian Chi did a demo and he decided he was going to go try out some of the solutions. And he did. And he brought that he bought a bunch of these networking devices for his team. and they just loved him. And so they sent a nice letter over. He sent a nice letter over to Brian, and Brian was like, "This is awesome! Like, we'd love to just have you on. This will be like a new thing for us, new segment to bring people on who listen, who take some of our recommendations, because a lot of times we don't really know what we're talking about, but sometimes we do. And when we do, we should be known. We should know when we are." And so he came on and just kind of talked about his solution, and it was just awesome just to see, people being able to reuse our information that we pass out there.
And it helps when it's an international billion-dollar company too, and he's the CISO. It's not like
I was surprised to hear all the things that they were doing, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, we just use this $30 device, and it's really changed our world." And I'm like, "Man, that's just awesome."
His office is off of a famous, I don't know if you know the intersection in Detroit. It's in Troy, Michigan, and it's off I-75, and it's exit 69 Big Beaver Road. So that is a
funny story. I used to go to Detroit all the time. I actually went to college at University of Toledo.
Oh, okay. Detroit Light, Detroit Junior, yeah.
Yeah. And so we used to go, obviously, to Windsor all the time. We used to go to Greektown. We used to go we used to go everywhere in Detroit. So I used to spend a lot of time up there.
My daughter just turned 19. We took her to Windsor to order her first drink legally. She goes to Michigan State, so it wasn't her first drink, but that was a very cool.
Is Windsor
passing.
Still nice up there? They still keeping it nice?
It's like 3 bars. It's pretty crappy. Yeah, it's ever since they made everyone use passports. And the dollar wasn't $1.50 for $1. It pretty much died. So that was the running joke. Is Bentley still there? Is Don Cherry? Yeah, they're all gone. All of them are gone. So I always like starting with origin stories, right? Anyone that's been in tech over the period. Once you got a little gray in your beard, I love talking origin stories.
Yep.
What originally got you, I guess, into tech? What was your first baud modem? I guess let's go there.
Oh my gosh. 2400. Yeah. I would say what really got me into it was, when I was I first started out in building and programming Atari cartridges. And that might sound like an obligatory thing to say, obviously, because Elon in the latest, Isaacson book, he talks about that's how he started too, Elon Musk. But I think
really? I didn't know that.
He said it's exactly how he started out too, is programming these Atari cartridges, 2600. Wow. So, but anyways, the reality is that's where I started as well. And I'd say worked my way through all of that, and worked way through IBMs and Macintoshes, and I'd say in high school I had a really good mentor who it was actually a woman librarian who started building a computer center, and she wanted to get people programming in BASIC in there, and so she actually hired somebody in, and I got to start learning BASIC, and that's when I knew I wanted to get into computers. And I had a good friend who ended up being an amazing entrepreneur, Adam Jackson. He started a bunch of companies in San Francisco. One of them is called Brain Trust right now. It's using it's using the blockchain to manage hiring people and being able to share their wealth with the instead of having a gig economy. And so anyways, he kind of got into selling computers to build them and sell them. And so I got into that as well. And we started building them, and I started working at places like CompUSA, and I used to use my discounts at CompUSA back in the day in Circuit City when they were still around, when Best Buy didn't crush them. And then I just worked my way through that. And I actually went to college for electrical engineering because I thought I was going to go into hardware design. And then I spent about 6 months in a laboratory as an intern for Intel when they were the Itanium group over here in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. And then I knew I didn't want to be in a laboratory anymore. I knew I wanted to actually do some stuff that help customers. And when I went back to school, I actually decided I was going to jump to computer science, but I ended up double majoring because there was only a couple extra credits. You have so much stuff you have to become an electrical engineer for. You got, extra credits is nothing. So I did that, and then I went to a career fair up in Michigan, University of Michigan's career fair, and there was a company called Creative Solutions up there, which used to, I think you guys are familiar, it was purchased by Thomson Reuters about maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
Over in Ypsilanti over there. And I worked for them. They made a product called UltraTax. And so I decided, they were offering internships and co-ops to this thing. And so I took a job over there, my first software job as an intern. And, I work with so many eccentric CPAs in that business of helping them, cheat their way through people's taxes with the logic in the background that
Right.
I got hooked. I was like, this is fun. Like, I like to change the logic, and I got to work with a lot of really cool people. And so I decided to just start taking different jobs. In fact, I worked as a systems control engineer at Anheuser-Busch. I used to program their PLCs. I worked at Intel again. I worked at AMD at one point, just kind of like taking these random jobs that did different things, whether it's hardware programming, firmware programming, just high level software programming. So anyways, long story short, it just got me hooked on developing software and getting into that side of things. And then when, again, I went back to the Michigan Career Fair, and Microsoft was there, and they were hiring for their latest Great Plains acquisition they called it Microsoft Business Solutions at the time. And they had just branded it. And I went in for an interview, and lo and behold, there's Doug Burgum. I don't know if you guys know Doug Burgum. He's one of the latest GOP candidates that's out there trying to go up against Trump. And he's the governor of North Dakota now, but he used to be an entrepreneur. He started Great Plains Software years ago and built it out, and then Microsoft acquired it from him. And he went off and did his own ventures. But he hired me on, and I got to be I got to start building solutions for small companies through. And the funny part is, it was in North Dakota. Started in North Dakota.
Nice. I got you beat only on one thing. Mine was a 300 baud modem on a Commodore 64. Half of my buddies were Apple IICs. The other half were Commodores. So it was like the Crips and the Bloods, right? And
Right.
We were big in the BBS scene, and all the good BBSs were in the 248 area code. I tell the story a lot. We were over in the 586. So my buddy's brother wrote a freaking program to run overnight to find the codes that worked for AT&T for the, that 7-digit for free long distance.
Right.
And we got to use it for about 3-4 months, and went on our favorite BBSs. And then we got the phone bill. They caught up to us. And my dad threw the modem in the basement, so I had to sneak to my buddy's houses. So mine has got in trouble a few times at school for finding kids' grades and making fun of them, and found out I hated coding, but I knew more than the teacher. But I fell into sales and kind of went down that route. So I always knew stuff, but I stopped knowing right when you hit the GUI or the CLI or the right when it's time to code. I'm like, yep, I'm out, I'm good. But I did sell beer, so the whole Anheuser-Busch thing.
Oh yeah,
that was my job.
I loved working for them. It was a great company, and I just in fact, I was going to take a job out of college with them down in Florida in the Florida brewery, but when Microsoft came knocking, I was like, okay, maybe I'll go to a true software company to learn some stuff, and then I'll take a break and go over to actually applying it. That was my selling beer in college. That was you get Dinger cases for $5 and bring them to parties with a case of Natty Light.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But it brings up a good point. I always like doing that because I don't want to say we're running it. It is a talent shortage right now, and when I came up, all you really had to do was grab a CCNA or an MCSE, and you were guaranteed to be for a top level. Granted, no one else ahead of us really knew much what they were doing. You had the old DARPANET guys, or what I mean, some of the old timers, they were mainframers, but for new technology, we were at the perfect age. And I see now that went away. You don't that cert. Because it used to be Splunk was a religion for a while, where you could come up as a Splunker, and then you were guaranteed to get in as an analyst somewhere. It doesn't. None of it exists anymore. I mean, I know they have X programs, and they bring boot camps and things like that, and get started as a BA or something. But this huge talent shortage. But I kind of feel like either the company's missed or what missed. I guess what's your take on how do we feel? Because it's funny. I have a teenage daughter at Michigan State, and I got a teenage daughter coming up. She goes, I don't know what to major in, Dad. I go, if you're going to ask me right now, I'm going to say cybersecurity or data science. And the first words out of her mouth are F that. And I go, there's 3,000 jobs you can do in both of those. It's not, I don't know what they feed them, but I looked at all of her friends, that none of them are majoring in IT. None of them want to get into it.
Oh.
And I'm shocked because
it's not sexy enough, I guess.
I don't know. That's where the money's at too. And they're like, what should I do? And I'm like, I don't know. So what do you see a disconnect, or what? I guess what is what's going on out there with the kid? How do we reach these kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think when because when I first started at Microsoft, they were doing obviously their certifications there, and they asked us to get them, and I just never did, never spent the time to do it. because I felt like, they were snapshotting technology in time and expecting you to go learn these proprietary things that would eventually just disappear in a couple of years later. And I felt like that was such a waste of my time than learning some of the fundamental foundations of networking or how switches worked or just how to program the bytes and arrays in the operating system and stuff like that. And so I just stuck with the fundamentals. And I think that's a lot what happened is the market got so diverse in solutions that people didn't want to go out and get their badges of honor of these these things that cost very expensive. Cisco certifications are very expensive, and Microsoft certifications, MSDN, all these certifications were just really expensive to get and even study and get. And so people stopped doing it because it just felt like it wasn't return on investment.
Well, it was $20,000 in New Horizons. I remember it vividly for a basic. And then you were stuck in this never ending, you're not done certing ever.
Right. Never ending. And you felt like like I said, you felt like it was just, I remember having the binders. They used to give them the binders of all the certifications for the MSD and stuff. And I used to have them on my wall. And I would say I could probably randomly pick one out and look at it and it would already be out of date.
Sure.
And it's just amazing how that changed. I think that, a lot of these large companies, obviously Cisco being one of them, Oracle, they still have these things that exist and they're still sought after because they badge the solution architect symbol onto them and say, okay, if you can understand this material and apply this material, you can be a solution architect, you can be a consultant, you can sell this stuff to companies that need solutions. And so that's how we're gonna manage our learnings and our trainings. And I think that makes more sense, is like you're kind of applying real world solutions. However, like I still don't think there's a massive return on investment, because I know a guy who's been doing it. He doesn't even have a college degree. He's been doing it since I can remember. He started at an ISP, Cisco certified, and CCNA and all this stuff, and he's been paying ever since. And every year he has to spend a bunch of time learning new stuff because everything's obsolete. And I don't know if he even thinks it's useful anymore.
Most of the good ones I know either have biology degrees or they didn't even graduate.
History, biology.
Yeah. Because literally we ask people, I got a chem degree, and everybody starts laughing. It's like, I taught myself, But when you look at like cybersecurity, Randy, how long have we been talking about this? 5 years that they have negative employment or negative unemployment, whatever the word is.
It's hard to fill.
And and that's the thing I try to explain to my daughter, and that's I don't know if that's getting through. It's like, this is all about like putting a puzzle together. This is all about, like, my daughter thinks, I've been in sales my whole career. I go, what do you think I do for a living? She goes, you answer the phone and say you want to buy some shit. I go, God, you just like my career summed up in a nut. Or you take people out for beer. Like, that's not what I, maybe it is kind of what I do, but but at least on the cyber thing, everything's a puzzle. We have a business problem. How do we solve it? And we're going to use a technology. It is about technology, but only to solve a business problem. And otherwise it doesn't exist. I don't know if that's getting through. If the teacher community just doesn't get it, or the allure of it, I don't. There's a huge disconnect right now.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think if you go and look at a lot of the security or the different certificates that are out there, even the different majors that are out there, a lot of them don't apply to real world applications of things. So I think that's one of the biggest problems. I knew that some organizations, like I know that MIT now has, I walk past there once in a while here, being over here in Boston, and they have some new degrees that are focused on cybersecurity, and they're all about, like you were saying, solving puzzles, attack vectors, understanding how your adversary thinks, and so they're teaching it the right way. And I think that's what really gets people interested. I think that more programs need to do that, is throwing people into the deep end and watching how they solve the problem and learning how to solve problems and think how an attacker would think. And then you train yourself to think like that all the time, and that's when you become good at it. And I think that's what's really missing, is they're just trying to teach the information, and people get bored, or they just don't want to do it. And I think that's the biggest problem here.
Well, if you think about it, what was the entry level cybersecurity job? It was an analyst. What did it mean before UEBA? It was, you looked at log files all day. Let's be honest, that sucks. Like,
yeah, it does.
What'd you do today? I looked at 30,000 log files. And then, like, there was no one. That's what I did. I'm like, that's not, I don't want to say to gamify it, but like that's a candidly, it's a garbage job, and you know it.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of the jobs are like, I mean, even data entry jobs, they used to just have you sit at the, and just convert text into database entries. We weren't actually a database administrator. You were a data entry person, and that was just a boring hell job. I mean, all of them seem to turn out like that. And so people don't want to get into them, even though they might pay pretty consistently and statically.
So you got into a cybersecurity, and I like having CISOs on for a few different reasons. One, I like ragging on sales guys because I think my profession's been destroyed by a few bad apples. I think every profession gets destroyed, but I'm the do you ever see the weightlifter guy that always yells "do better, be better," whatever? He's like he trashes on people on TikTok, and he's like, "Do better." Like I'm totally that guy for the sales community, but like for the cyber community, I always get enthralled with the amount of vendors that come into the space and all the just the garbage acronyms that get invented. I got a text from a listener a week ago, and he was like, I was writing notes when you interviewed so and so, and he goes, "I loved your line. Nobody gives a shit about your dashboard. Tell me how you solve a business problem."
I remember that episode. Yeah,
and it's like everybody, the first thing when you talk to a guy, he's like, "Oh, I want to show you my dashboard." I'm like, "No one cares." Like, what is good in your opinion? I'm dying to know how do you get through the mess of this vendor landscape? It seems like for every one that dies or one that gets acquired, two pop up. Cisco buys Splunk, and it's like, all right, I got 1,300 RIP Splunk texts that day. What's your take on the vendor landscape in the cyber world?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is they do generalize all these things to say, hey, these are solutions that will solve all of your problems, like zero trust or DevSecOps or these types of things, right? These are things that are supposed to unify your organization and find solutions that will bridge the get you to the thing where you need to be cheaper. And I think that's the biggest problem is a lot of these analysts or Gartner or whatnot, they're building these sectors, and then they're kind of glorifying a lot of the vendors out there to be high in that sector. And so that you as an organization think, well, what do I need? Well, I need security. Well, maybe I'll just go find something that's SIEM, or maybe I go find something that has SD-WANs. Maybe that'll help me. So maybe go figure that out, right? So I think
we need more SACE. Let's put some SACE in. That'll fix everything.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that all of them that's the biggest problem is they generalize these things, and people don't really know what they're getting. In fact, I had a guy on one time that talked about their software was all about reducing costs by finding the things that you paid for that you don't need and that you don't use. And so they have some machine learning that figures out where you're and they're finding that most people use about 10% of what they purchase, like 80% of all the things that they paid for. So you're paying for SASE solutions or SIEM solutions or all these things, and you're only using 10% of it. And so you're just paying for nothing. And I think that's just a huge problem is people can't weed through all the bull and figure out what they actually need. And that's why you need people, like you were saying, that work in the trenches, that understand the actual problems they're trying to solve, and then work your way up from the ground rather than the other way around, is just buying a bunch of solutions.
Well, that was the thing. Zero Trust was never a product. And they came out and they said, hey, we're a zero trust product. And we're like, well, what the hell does that mean? It was always a philosophy the way I interpreted it. I'm just a dumb sales guy. So I'm like, all right. So I would ask everyone, like, wait, walk me through this. And it's still a philosophy, in my opinion, but people are still selling products.
Right.
And again,
it's true. I mean, the products that they're trying to sell is obviously they're saying, hey, I think some of the ones that are pretty interesting are they'll walk through your network and find all of your, the services that you're running, all the vendors that you use, and find a way to isolate them and see what identity services. So they do a lot of scanning and reporting and recommendation engines to sit there. That's the kind of the zero trust they have. Or they make you, again, they tunnel you down to using specific hardware or endpoints that they manage, that they, so that this way you're kind of forced in that direction. So any service that runs through it. So these are, again, generalized solutions that probably cost you an arm and a leg eventually to implement if you buy into it. So I think, understanding the fact that zero trust is all about breaking up your services, that, the whole term of micro-segmentation, and making sure that you know who's accessing them, how they're accessing them, and using things like MFA and identity management and all that stuff. that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of knowledge of understanding what you're doing. Like, you can't just buy a solution that's going to go and do it for you. So I think that's another big misnomer in the enterprise.
So did they finally fix email phishing? Because I remember there was a story a week about, Susie in accounting clicked the email, sent a $600,000 check from, the CFO said, and you don't either they're being very quiet about it now. And, and I also don't hear the attacks either, where they're shutting companies down. Is the media just not reporting on it, or what's going on out there?
I think that a lot of these companies are pretty afraid now. I mean, you hear some in the news. You hear a lot of ransomware is still on the rise, right? I mean, and they're all usually driven by email phishing and and that kind of thing. I would say that a lot of companies are just afraid of some of the latest, things that are going on around rules and and different things, the potential fees that they might get charged if they make these things public. So they're being really, really cavalier about what they choose to disclose and not. So I think that's part of it. Some of these things are smaller than they think. So then, I think there's a certain dollar amount or a certain impact on your customers or users you have to disclose. And so if it's smaller than that, they're just kind of keeping it under wraps. I think that's most of the problems, because if you think about it, phishing is probably one of the largest issues that are out there today. And there's a lot of advanced threat protection or email protection that they try to sell people. But the reality is, it comes down to the weakest link, and your weakest link is the people.
Absolutely.
People are reading the emails, right? And I don't think you're ever going to, unless you're going to force people through hordes and hordes of mindless training around how an email can come in and how you're supposed to get through phishing. It's never going to be a solution. So
I tell my kids, I tell my coworkers, I'm like, do not click any link, go to the URL in a browser, period, for whatever, for your bank, for Best Buy, to whatever. If they're trying to hack my Venmo 13 times a day, I get constant emails.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
I started getting phone calls. Press one.
The best thing I've ever been through, I was at a company, it was a bank. I can't tell you who the bank is, but they did this thing where I was actually on site. It was an embedded engineer with this bank to help them out with the solution. And what they did is they went through this campaign and they actually sent phishing emails. They were, they were created by the bank to teach their employees about like phishing emails. And when, and they tried to see if the person did the right thing. Did they click the link? Did they respond? What did they do? Right? Did they delete it? And based off of that, they essentially, sent them another email saying, okay, you clicked on this link. This is what you did wrong. That kind of thing. And I think it was probably one of the best campaigns I saw, because it was like, they essentially put these people through this thing and they said, this is what could have happened. Like, your credentials could have been stolen and the bank could have been compromised. And they kind of went them through what they had done and what they could have caused. And I saw a lot of people respond to that. Like, a lot of people were like, hey, I'm never clicking on a freaking link again in my email, or I'm always going to look for the email address to make sure it's internal, or, so like, it was definitely, they used a little bit of fear in there, a little bit of training, a little bit of, exercise there. And I think it worked really well. And so that's some of the things I do even with my kids, is like, okay, look at this email. What do you see? What's wrong with this thing? And I think that's really how we're going to keep things safer nowadays, before you add all this other layering into the system.
Some of the funny local stories was, it's two FinServe companies, both in the same space. One of them, they did the phishing thing internal, and the worst performing group was the security team. Like, for some reason, all of the analysts clicked it. And then at another one, they were leaving, what the hell were those things called, Randy? The USB keys that they were just leaving around parking lots.
Ooh.
Just
I remember that. I don't know what
USB sticks. There's a name for it. But they were leaving.
Where they were infected, where people were using them.
Yeah. They were leaving.
Yeah.
So people were smart. They were grabbing them and going, oh shit, here HR, here's this thing I found. This is bad. And then HR was plugging them in. So they're like, yeah, we kind of failed. They're like, we need to train more than just the people. This got hit from everywhere. So I think, again, it's the people. And I think, I don't think, here's the thing. It's all about, how fast can you get back up and running? Where's your data sitting? Is it backed up? How much are you backing up? Right. And I wanted to talk, that was one of the things I was thinking about today. I wanted to talk to you about was, we always, the next big boom, like it was electricity or steam engine, electricity. And then now it's the internet. And now it's data. And they're trying to profess this as the next big thing. And I'm going through the same stuff I went through with cybersecurity like 5 years ago, where now you have your, let's go through the buzzwords. You ready? You want to help me with this one? You have data in motion. You have data cataloging. You have data quality. You have data lakes. You have data clean rooms. You have then you get into the visual, the dashboarding and the reporting and I'm trying to think of all the other things in the data. There's probably 13 I'm missing.
Yeah.
Data protection and deduping and all that. Well, that's part of quality, but again, and then now there's 16 vendors you got to deal with, and everybody's doing about 3/4 of the way good in the Snowflakes and the Databricks, but you still need something else. You still need a Confluent, and you still need a Informatica still plays. Like what do you make sense of that world? Is it like, I know like a lot of it's marketing jargon with data clean room and all that, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I think this is another problem with a lot of organizations, because they have lots of data. Most companies, whether they're SMBs, small little mom and pops, they have tons of data. I have customers, they have tons of data. They don't know what to do with it, and so they go to look to see, okay, well, how do I secure my data? How do I back up my data? How do I make it so it's searchable or usable, or I can profit off of this data, or so what do I do? And so again, these companies are selling that, right? They're saying, hey, we'll just ingest all your data and all your problems, your business problems go away. We'll back it up for you. We'll put it in the cloud for you. We'll analyze it for you. We'll tell you which customers to contact for you. And the reality is, like, every business has a different need, and none of these solutions will ever, without a bunch of customizations, will ever be a one-stop shop. And I think that's the biggest problem, is companies, people don't really know what they need. And so they go and buy these massive solutions. I mean, obviously, working for Microsoft, we have all the things you just mentioned, and they're all different Azure services that I can go and plug into, right? And I could go buy them one by one and start putting my data there. The question is, unless I really know what I'm doing there, or what I'm going to be overlapping over top of it, or what kind of data analytics I'm doing, or analysis cubes I'm building, like, it's really just an extra service I'm paying for just to store my data. So, like, I think that's the biggest problem, is they just don't know how to apply this stuff. And I think you could probably have a marketeer come out to every business and tell them how great it's going to be, but and companies will buy into it until they find out, again, they're not using half of it. So, right. I think, well,
that's and then, 5 years ago, MDM was mobile device management. Now it's master data management. And it's right. Like, well, what the hell is that? So like, I'll hear MDM in a meeting. I go, what are we doing with the cell phones? And they're like, idiot, like get in 2023. I'm like, oh, sorry. But it's a thing where we're still, you think they'd figure out we're not the acronym hell thing. And it's worse today, I think. It's now that the 4-letter acronyms, it's getting to be, I'm waiting for the 5-letter acronyms, right? It's still, I don't know, like the people that have been in this business, and you wonder why the kids aren't getting into IT right after all the shit we just talked about for the last half hour. Just trying to figure this whole world out. I wouldn't change a thing for the world. I love it, but at the end of the day, it's God, they make it confusing. And I don't know if it's the marketers, or the product people. I don't. They're going to blame the salespeople. It's all, right. It's that circle of death.
Well, they go after the trends. I mean, we talked a little bit of ransomware in the beginning. Like, that's the fear right now. Every company, especially medical companies, are freaking out about ransomware. What are they doing? Well, they're doing exactly what the industry wants them to do. They're going to pay for ransomware insurance. That's number one. And then they're also going into backup solutions.
A lot.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's the problem, is these marketeers and these corporations, they go after the trending fears of the day, and they provide solutions. I guess that's what startups do too. I mean, that's where a lot of these startups are doing AI around, is they're using AI to solve some of the trending issues that are out there today. And some of them might work reliably. Some of them might not. We have no clue until people start utilizing them. And I think that's the biggest problem, is companies, there's so much stuff that's out there that's watering everything down that nobody really knows how to use it.
So let's get into AI real quick. I mean, that's the hot one right now. And I think I don't want to say that there's a misnomer, because I think a lot of us that have been around, like, this is more or less machine learning, but then the generative part is what changed things. Because we're always used to the baselining weird looking, baselining normal looking for weird with the machine learning world. And now we're getting into this generative stuff, and everyone's intrigued and scared and opportunistic and and everything else that matters. And then we've written 100 use cases for it, right. And everybody wants to talk to us about it, but it's like, well, what is it that we're doing here? Like, it's more than just a chat bot too. I mean, what are you seeing on your side of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is there, I've talked about this, till I was blue in the face. I mean, it's the truth is a lot of the stuff you're seeing is a lot of parlor tricks, right? There are people, of course, the YouTube influencers are getting out there and they're doing fancy things and they're giving you checklists on how you can use large language models and chatbots and generating things and making money off of it and all that stuff. And so it's definitely become a parlor trick that people go, okay, well, what do we really need this for business? But I think what I'm seeing in the industry in general is that machine learning, especially specialized machine learning models, natural language processors, these neural networks, these specialized models that do very specific things, those are the ones that make the most impact for companies because they are specialized for their very specific thing. Like example would be, I like to talk about the latest DDoS attack on Google that happened, one of the biggest in the world to happen in history. It was taken down in 2 minutes. And the reason why it was taken down in 2 minutes or stopped in 2 minutes was Google used special machine learning models to detect this traffic and shut it down. And I think that's where the power of machine learning and AI comes in, is it's specialized models that are trained for very specific things and very specific data, and they go do things a lot faster than a human can do. I would have gotten an alert in 2 minutes, but it would have taken me a while to go shut a bunch of things down. So I think that's the key where AI exists. And I would see these generative technologies, I think where it helps is actually helping you, summarizing things is one of the biggest things. So if I got a bunch of logs, just like Splunk is doing, right? They get a bunch of logs, they're able to weed out all the noise and give you what's useful in that log information. Well, that's exactly what a lot of these generative technologies, you can ask them questions using natural language. They can go and generate these actions or insights that go and apply to these models that then models run in the background and they process data for you and produce results. That's where the power is. It's a bridge. It's an abridged guide to getting to the final destination faster than you could possibly do as a human. It's not this other stuff that they're parading around.
See, the hallucination stuff scares me, and I'll give you an example. We just talked about this with Scott Smith a couple of weeks ago, and it was, if you don't feed it the question, it's kind of like your wife. If you don't ask it exactly what you want, the answer will not be what you want to hear. But basically what it did, it hallucinated, and it said, well, why did you say that? Because it knew it was false. And it said, well, that's what I thought you wanted to hear. And you're like, oh no, like this, what did we get ourselves into? Right. It's like, and the biggest, I hate to bring security back into it, but that's our biggest conversations we have every day is, if I feed this thing all my stuff, where does it stop? Right. Because a lot of the use cases we're doing now is digitizing. Like we're working on a project right now where we're digitizing the fix books for the robots on a assembly line. And basically that you can, hey, this thing's got an error. Here's the error code. What's the fix? And so instead of looking through a manual like they used to, we can quick type, and it's like an internal Google for the operator's manual. Fantastic. But like, what happens if that operator's manual gets out? Right. I met with a large motorcycle manufacturer once, and they said, if our that's based out of Milwaukee, you've never heard of them. But they said basically, if our plans get to China, like we're dead as a company. And so like security's on everybody's mind. So like everybody wants to jump into GenAI, but like, how do we, how do we insulate and stop this stuff from getting out to the greater LLM? Right.
Yeah, I think that's there's a company that I talked to recently, Adeon. They build these models themselves internally, and they basically do they bring in pharmaceutical data that's from trials, and they do analytics, and they process and they use other data, like for instance people's social feeds and medical history, and they actually helped with the COVID vaccines becoming more prominent because of the data that they use. And these models, they basically bring this data in-house and they put it in their own virtual network that's only accessible by the customer. And they use these models that are generic models, but that are trained specifically for the data set that they're using. And their whole company and the way that they operate is based off of that. And I think that's the models that companies want to know about, is that their data is safe, it's segmented and segregated away from anybody else. It's only accessible by them. And when the models run at the end of the day and they produce the insights, they don't go anywhere but where they have access to, and nobody else has access to it. And I think that's where companies will start to feel more comfortable with it, is the fact that this edge, I guess you can call it almost edge AI, where they're bringing these models down to the edge to where only corporations have access to them, and any type of learning that it only does it on their data, and it applies, and it only gets stored in their private virtual networks or whatever it's in. And I think that's why these pharmaceutical companies feel very safe with ADN. And I feel like that's where a lot of these other companies will feel safe too. If you're just going to go and apply, generative technologies in your organization to, again, in a very general way, you're definitely going to be in the shape that a lot of people are in, is that, it's going to be ingesting and producing insights that you might not need or want, and it could be, uploading data to other organizations that you have no idea. So yeah, I think it needs to be very specialized. I think this is the next, like you were saying, is these skills of figuring out what models are right for what organizations and how to set them up and bring them in house into private networks or private clouds is really the next step. So
do you think it makes it less valuable though? Because like it's kind of like Google. It's only as good as what you can feed it, right? I don't
think it makes less value. As long as you give it the right data. I mean, unless you're saying the data that they need is what Google, like everything that everyone's ever talked about, right? I think that's the key. Is like, I'll give you an example. OpenAI has ChatGPT, have these new plugin models, and you can basically say, okay, I don't want to use GPT-4 or GPT-3. I want to use the plugins, the data sets that are within these plugins, these research files or these things over here. And, then you get more specialized responses. It's not as fun as you're getting from the normal chat GPTs, but they're more specialized, and they answer the exact questions, like you were saying, that you're looking for. And they're not as creative. They don't necessarily produce hallucinations as much. And I think that's the key, is like corporations will find more use out of that than the general, the AGI, right? The ability to think on its own and use all the data in the world, right? And become its own technology. I think that's, people are conflating those two things.
See, I always see the evil in the internet. I think I spent too much time on Reddit. But here's the thing, if you say the sky is blue and I create a bot and I create, 3 billion web pages that say the sky is green, and now AI picks that up and says, what color is the sky? And it's conflicted. There's 3 billion people say it's green, 2 billion people say it's blue. I think it's green. It's easily swayable. So like, again, we don't want to get into this whole purveyor of truth thing, but it's at the end of the day, so how the hell do you govern all this? It's going to be madness, and we're not far off from it.
Right. Yeah. I think that is one of the big problems, is that, I was talking to somebody, one of the leading architects in the OpenAI world. And he was saying, what would be really interesting is to watch these things learn, but then learn from each other, and they not only learn from each other, but learn from their hallucinations. And so now you're rewriting history based off the hallucinations. And so again, when you say somebody asks the question, it becomes the answer is the hallucination. And you go to any one of these AI chat systems or generative systems, they all produce the same information because they're using the same hallucination as historical context. And he's like, that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about them not knowing the difference and feeding each other. And eventually our history becomes blanked out. We're going to have to save our historical documents, because if we don't, the history becomes what AI says history is.
Right.
And I think that's the scary part of it.
And then they create their own language, then they lock us out, then they figure out how to kill us. We've seen this movie. I'm just saying. I think because that's the first time we have these. Every time we have this conversation for the first time with someone, it's like, I've seen Skynet. Like, talk to and then they show, oh look, pretty chat bot. Oh look, there's here's a person talking to when you ask a question. Like, ooh, it's like Homer with the
parlor tricks. Yeah, those are the scary ones though. The ones that I find the most valuable are, like, I'll give an example. I read a lot of articles and I talk to a lot of people even before our shows to try to learn about some of the things I don't know about. Like, a lot of the times I interview people and I don't know their market, and so I have to go and learn. And so I'll go pull up research papers. And, if you've ever read a research paper before, sometimes you want to pull your hair out with how boring they are.
That's what happened to my hair.
Yeah, we can pull this the beard here.
Yeah.
But I think what I use things like ChatGPT for is I feed the research paper and I say, give me 5 terse bullets that give me the exact things that I should know about here, right? And I give it some more instructions, and it produces the information. And again, I also scan the document, make sure again it didn't hallucinate on me. But it really, really helps me boil down and distill down the information to what I need to know. And I'll tell you, that's really helpful in email. It's really helpful in large documents that people send me sometimes. Again, I'm using these Copilot techniques that Microsoft has now that it has really changed the shape of my job, because now I don't have to schedule a bunch of time during the day to go learn about something new, or go read about something, because I have an abridged version of that. Even Microsoft Teams has this built in now too. So I can go through, chat sessions that are, 20 days long and say, okay, give me the outcomes of every day and give me the action items that I have on me, or what's still in question or whatever. And it will answer me my questions without me having to do the work to go do it. That's the power of these things. It's not generating new lyrics to let it be, it's just amazing to see how people, get into the weeds on it.
Homer Simpson as Scarface, all the crap that we played with. Me, I wish they took all the audio and gave me my meeting notes, but the problem is the whole bottom half would be like, who ordered turkey? I didn't want this, soup.
Right.
Like, how do you discern between? No, I want this part. Delete all that. Because the first 10 minutes is always, how are the kids?
Yeah, the audio is hard. Audio translation transformation is definitely hard. I think I don't use it for that. I usually use it mainly just for text to text, right? Text summaries, because that's just much easier static data that they can use. Voice is a lot harder, right? Because of all the transformations and detections it has to do. So
so now we just figured out how to incorporate GenAI with blockchain, with digital transformation, with the cloud.
You'd be a billionaire.
Exactly. Those are always my favorite. Because I'm like, you brought up. I hate to go all the way back, but like in the first 10 minutes, you brought up like an actual usable thing with blockchain, and I thought it was gone. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Are you seeing it being applied today? Is it a thing?
That's a good question. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think organizations are utilizing it as a way to decentralize their data, decentralize their networks. And I still think it's applied. Like, I think, like I was saying, I knew a good guy is Adam Jackson. He's started a company called Brain Trust. And, when he started talking about blockchain, I thought the same thing. I thought Web 3.0 was kind of on its way out. Crypto was on the downfall. Does it make sense to do it? But the way they've implemented it is they utilize what's good about it. And that's the whole concept of blockchain and decentralization. And I think that's kind of like if you think about it, social networks like Mastodon and the others ones that are out there, they're still utilizing it as well. And they make sense. But I think according to the way that Mastodon is implemented, where it's kind of hard to discover stuff and find people and follow people and post across these different decentralized servers is a hard thing, and they haven't figured that out, but it's still out there. I mean, it's a great technology. It's a great idea. It's just that you're not going to see a lot of it in the enterprise, because again, that gets away from some of the big tech companies that are out there that are not utilizing it, that say it's not useful. And, that you want to be at a very trusted cloud service provider, right? Like AWS or anybody that's out there, all the big wigs, right? That why go to a decentralized system if you can have that? But you see a lot more in medical. Like the medical is still using blockchain and technologies there. You see a lot of it. Banks use it actually, surprisingly, in the background, in the back end, for how they're managing some of their transactional systems. So not for crypto, but for for other systems. So it's still out there. Right. It's just people, it's lost its luster, basically.
I don't see it. I see it for compute. Like, hey, I want to grab, if I'm gaming, like I see certain applications. Like if I'm banking and I have data and I have data I need secured. I hate using security all the time. But again, I don't want that decentralized. Anyway, that's just me. I'm just a dumb sales guy. But hey, what are you watching these days? What are you doing for fun?
Man, I just went through Silo. You ever see the show Silo? And amazing thing on Apple TV. I started getting into, I always liked the old 80s Quantum Leap show. And so I started seeing the new Quantum Leap show on Peacock. So I started watching that. Pretty good. It's actually pretty good.
I was debating because I like the old one too much.
Oh my gosh. I showed the old one to my kids, and one of my oldest is 13, and he watched it and he goes, this is terrible. And I'm like, it's not terrible. He's like, it's too cheesy. And then I had him watch the new one. He goes, I really like the new one. I'm like, man, that sucks. The old one's great.
Yeah. It's got the new technology. It's better. Did you watch Ahsoka? What'd you think?
Oh, I loved it. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Yeah. Fantastic. I think that Filoni, how do you say his last name? Filoni. What's Dave's last name?
Now you messed me up.
I'm sorry.
Filoni.
Yeah. I think the guy's a genius. Like, he definitely holds true to everything that's. In fact, it's funny you said that, because I was just reading this.
Oh,
Timothy Zahn's Thrawn book, and I was reading it before Ahsoka came on because I really wanted to understand the back history with all of that. And I think they did a fantastic job. I was really excited about it.
I don't get angry, but I get really angry what 7, 8, 9 should have been. I think that's what Filoni's doing. This is a middle finger to 7, 8, 9. And I'm looking at this going, oh my God, can you imagine if it started, 5 years after Jedi? And I'm like, see, here's the thing. Like, I saw Star Wars when I was 5 in the theater. I'm old man. Like, this has been religion to me my whole life. I still have the Burger King glasses on my mantle. Like, you know what I mean? This is, I didn't read the books. I've never been a big reader, but like, everything else I consume, like, it's religion, and like, it's so good.
I think one of the first movies I saw, actually, is funny you said that, is it was a bootleg copy of Star Wars. Like, my uncle used to have these bootleg copies where people used to go in and take the camera, and so we had the cassette tape or the VCR tape that we dropped in, and it was sideways, and that's how I watched Star Wars for the first time, as a bootleg copy of it. And I'll never forget it. I was hooked after that.
We'll end with this. Did you see the book that came out that had Lucas's vision for 7, 8, 9 like 30 years ago?
No, I didn't.
And he basically came out and said, this one, there was one about the son or the then it was about, the last one was about the kids. And so Princess Leia was supposed to be the Grand Chancellor. Luke was starting up the Jedi Temple. It was the Solo twins, right? Which would have been, Kylo Ren and what's her face, and basically would have followed that journey. Then it would have been like the Mandalorian, where the Fett's owned, it would have been like, but then Maul was part of it, and he was training someone. So like this, then the whole Baby Yoda Mandalorian, that whole like, that's why I think Filoni's writing this whole arc, because it should have been 7, 8, 9.
Your synopsis there is already better than 7, 8, and 9. Better story. Yeah, better story already.
Oh, I agree with it.
They're already writing it. It followed the books too. The books, because they made them non-canon. Anyway, I'm going to get my blood pressure up. So on that note, hey, we can find Lou on TWiET.tv. This Week in Enterprise Technology. You call it TWiET?
TWiET. Yep.
TWiET. I didn't like that when you said that, but I'll get used to it. But no, this has been, honestly, it's been an absolute honor. This is kind of like when I got to interview Anthony Michael Hall. This goes right up there in the top of the trophy case.
Take that. That's a great interview.
No, I mean that. But yeah, Lou Maresca, find him on TWiET.tv. This has honestly been an honor. I look forward to a future podcast with you, and congrats on 500. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Randy.
Cool. Yeah. On behalf of Bob and Randy, this is the IT and the D show. We like to wrap things up. Do us a favor. Drink up your drinks. Get your phone numbers. You don't got to go home. You just got to get the hell out of here. See you next week. Drive careful. Beat it.